There is a particular kind of pain that comes from realizing you never tried to compete with anyone, never tried to draw attention to yourself, never tried to make people feel small, and yet somehow you still became the target of resentment. You showed up with a sincere heart. You worked quietly. You carried your responsibilities. You treated people with respect. You celebrated their victories. You tried to be kind. Yet there were moments when you could feel an invisible tension in the room. Conversations changed when you arrived. Certain people seemed uncomfortable around you without any clear reason. Others questioned your motives even when your intentions were pure. Some became distant after once being close. For many people who feel called, different, or deeply purpose-driven, this experience becomes a recurring pattern throughout life. It is confusing because it does not seem logical. You look back over your actions searching for mistakes. You wonder whether you accidentally offended someone. You question yourself repeatedly because your heart does not want conflict. Yet over time, you begin noticing that the jealousy directed toward you often had very little to do with what you did and much more to do with what your presence reflected. Not everyone reacts to another person's success, peace, strength, or character in the same way. Some people feel inspired, some feel encouraged, some feel hopeful, but others become uncomfortable because your existence quietly reminds them of something they have not yet confronted within themselves. The truth is that many chosen people spend years believing they are the problem when they are actually carrying qualities that unintentionally expose insecurities in others. Your perseverance may remind someone of their excuses. Your discipline may remind someone of opportunities they ignored. Your faith may remind someone of hope they abandoned. Your kindness may remind someone of bitterness they refused to release. Without speaking a single word, your life can become a mirror, and not everyone enjoys what they see reflected back. This is one reason jealousy often feels so confusing. It appears disconnected from reality because it is rarely about the surface issue people claim it is about. Sometimes people will criticize your confidence when the real issue is your courage. Sometimes they will criticize your humility because your humility still carries strength. Sometimes they will criticize your success when the real issue is that they never expected you to succeed at all. The chosen often experience this because they tend to grow through hardship. They develop depth that cannot be purchased, inherited, or imitated. They gain wisdom through suffering. They build character through seasons of isolation. They learn patience through waiting. They discover resilience through disappointment. These qualities create a quiet strength that becomes visible even when nothing is being said. There are people who enter a room demanding attention, and there are people whose presence naturally carries weight because of everything they have survived. The chosen are often part of the second group. They do not need to announce their strength because life already tested it. They do not need to prove their worth because their journey already refined it. Yet that very strength can trigger jealousy in those who only see the result and never see the process. Many people notice the confidence but never witness the years of self-doubt that came before it. They see the calmness but never saw the storms. They see the wisdom but never saw the heartbreak. They see the stability but never saw the nights when everything felt uncertain. They see the fruit but never saw the planting season. Because they only see the outcome, they create stories in their minds. They assume things were easier for you than they really were. They imagine advantages you never had. They overlook sacrifices they never witnessed. This misunderstanding becomes fertile ground for jealousy. What makes this especially painful is that chosen people are often naturally compassionate. They do not enjoy making others feel uncomfortable. They genuinely want harmony. They want everyone to succeed. They want everyone to heal. They want everyone to win. Because of this, they often spend years shrinking themselves to avoid attracting negative attention. They stay quiet when they should speak. They hide their achievements. They minimize their talents. They avoid celebrating milestones. They make themselves smaller in an attempt to make others comfortable. Yet no matter how much they reduce themselves, the jealousy often remains. Eventually, they discover a powerful truth. Jealousy was never created by their visibility. It was created by the unresolved emotions within those who chose comparison instead of growth. This realization becomes incredibly freeing. You stop carrying responsibility for emotions that were never yours to manage. You stop apologizing for gifts that God placed within you. You stop feeling guilty for surviving difficult seasons. You stop believing you must hide your light to earn acceptance. One of the most important lessons many chosen people learn is that your value does not decrease simply because someone else feels threatened by it. Your kindness remains valuable. Your faith remains valuable. Your perseverance remains valuable. Your character remains valuable. The fact that someone misinterprets your strength does not make your strength wrong. The fact that someone envies your growth does not make your growth selfish. The fact that someone resents your peace does not make your peace undeserved. There are seasons when jealousy will make you question everything about yourself. You may wonder whether being authentic is worth it. You may wonder whether standing out is worth the criticism. You may wonder whether remaining hopeful is worth the disappointment. Yet every challenge has also been teaching you something deeper. It has been teaching you how to anchor your identity in something stronger than public approval. When your worth depends entirely on the opinions of others, jealousy becomes devastating. But when your worth becomes rooted in purpose, faith, and truth, jealousy loses much of its power. The opinions of people still hurt, but they no longer define you. This is why so many chosen individuals eventually develop remarkable emotional resilience. Life forces them to learn that not everyone will understand them. Not everyone will celebrate them. Not everyone will support them. Yet they keep moving forward anyway. They continue helping others. They continue growing. They continue believing. They continue showing kindness. They continue pursuing purpose, not because everyone applauds them, but because they understand their calling is larger than public opinion. If you have experienced jealousy without explanation, there is a good chance you have spent years carrying invisible burdens. You carried misunderstandings that nobody corrected. You carried judgments that nobody questioned. You carried assumptions that nobody challenged. You carried loneliness that nobody noticed. Yet despite everything, you kept going. You carried burdens that few people ever noticed. Your kindness cost you more than most people will ever understand. Some of your greatest victories happened in silence when nobody was watching. The fact that you are still standing says more about your strength than you realize. God saw the tears that nobody else noticed. God saw the moments when you felt rejected. God saw the nights when you wondered whether you were the problem. God saw the effort you continued making, even when encouragement was nowhere to be found. Those moments mattered. Those struggles were not invisible. Those seasons were not wasted. The same experiences that made you question your value were also developing wisdom, compassion, and endurance within you. They were teaching you to find confidence without arrogance, strength without bitterness, and purpose without pride. They were preparing you to walk through life with a deeper understanding of both yourself and others. One day, many of the things that once confused you will make far more sense. You will recognize that some people were never reacting to your flaws. They were reacting to your potential. Some were not disturbed by what you had already become. They were disturbed by what they sensed you were becoming. The growth they witnessed reminded them of possibilities they had neglected within themselves. That realization does not make them bad people. It simply reveals the reality of human nature. Everyone is fighting battles. Everyone carries insecurities. Everyone faces fears. The difference is that some choose healing while others choose comparison. Some choose growth while others choose resentment. Some choose inspiration while others choose jealousy. You cannot make that choice for anyone else. You can only make it for yourself. So continue becoming the person God is shaping you to be. Continue walking with integrity. Continue choosing kindness. Continue growing through adversity. Continue believing that your story has value. Continue trusting that your difficult seasons had purpose. Continue remembering that your worth is not determined by those who fail to recognize it. There is a strength within you that kept moving forward even on your darkest days. Not every battle you fought was in vain. The seasons that tested you were also shaping who you were becoming. Your story has value even if it did not unfold the way you expected. You are worth far more than the moments that tried to make you feel small. If these words helped you recognize the quiet strength that has carried you through so much, subscribe to the channel and continue walking alongside a community that values faith, healing, purpose, and encouragement. May each message remind you that your journey matters, your growth matters, and that God has not forgotten the path you have traveled. One of the most difficult truths the chosen eventually discover is that jealousy does not always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from people you genuinely loved. Sometimes it comes from people you supported, encouraged, defended, and helped. Sometimes it comes from people whose happiness once mattered deeply to you. This reality can create a unique kind of heartbreak because it challenges your understanding of relationships. You expect opposition from those who dislike you. You expect criticism from those who misunderstand you. What you do not expect is resistance from people who once walked beside you. Yet for many chosen individuals, some of the deepest wounds come from watching relationships change as they grow into the person they were always meant to become. The painful part is that the transformation often begins before you even recognize it yourself. You start healing. You start becoming stronger. You begin setting healthier boundaries. You stop apologizing for existing. You stop accepting treatment that diminishes your worth. You become more confident in your values. You become more comfortable with your identity. You begin trusting God more deeply. You begin carrying yourself with greater peace. While these changes are healthy, not everyone celebrates them. Some people were comfortable with the version of you that doubted yourself. Some were comfortable with the version of you that constantly sought approval. Some preferred the version of you that ignored your own needs while prioritizing everyone else's. The moment you begin growing beyond those limitations, the relationship dynamic changes. Suddenly your confidence feels intimidating, your boundaries feel offensive, your peace feels distant, your self-respect feels threatening. Yet none of these qualities are harmful. They simply reveal that growth sometimes creates separation. This is one reason the chosen often experience loneliness during seasons of transformation. It is not because they became unlovable. It is because growth has a way of revealing who was connected to your soul and who was only connected to your struggles. There are people who genuinely celebrate your progress because they love seeing you become healthier, stronger, and more fulfilled. Then there are people who secretly preferred you when you felt smaller because your insecurity made them feel larger. The chosen often struggle with this realization because they naturally look for the best in people. They want to believe everyone has good intentions. They want to assume the highest motives. They want to give second chances and third chances and fourth chances. These qualities are beautiful, but they can also cause deep disappointment when reality becomes impossible to ignore. Eventually there comes a moment when you recognize that not every relationship can follow you into every season of life. Some relationships were designed for a chapter, not an entire story. Some people were part of your preparation, not your destination. Understanding this does not remove the sadness. It simply helps you stop blaming yourself for changes that were always beyond your control. Many chosen people spend years wondering why certain relationships became strained after positive changes occurred in their lives. They wonder why opportunities created tension instead of celebration. They wonder why healing created distance instead of closeness. The answer is often simpler than it appears. Growth forces everyone around you to respond. Some are inspired by it. Others feel challenged by it. Others feel threatened by it. The response reveals more about their internal condition than it does about your worth. Think about the seasons when you survived circumstances that should have broken you. There were moments when exhaustion became your daily companion. There were periods when disappointment seemed endless. There were nights when nobody knew how much pain you were carrying. Yet somehow you kept moving forward. You learned lessons. You developed wisdom. You became stronger. You discovered resilience you did not know you possessed. When people encounter the version of you that emerged from those experiences, they often see confidence. They often see strength. They often see peace. What they do not see is the cost. They do not see the tears. They do not see the loneliness. They do not see the prayers whispered in private. They do not see the battles fought in silence. They do not see the sacrifices made along the way. Because they never witnessed the process, they sometimes misunderstand the outcome. This misunderstanding fuels jealousy. They assume your strength appeared effortlessly. They assume your wisdom came naturally. They assume your confidence was always present. They assume your peace arrived without struggle. Yet the reality is very different. Everything valuable within you was refined through seasons that many people would never willingly choose. Every scar taught a lesson. Every disappointment developed endurance. Every setback created depth. Every challenge strengthened your character. This is why the chosen often possess a quiet strength that feels difficult to explain. It is not manufactured. It is earned through experience. One of the greatest mistakes you can make during seasons of jealousy is allowing other people's reactions to convince you that your growth is wrong. This temptation appears in subtle ways. You start hiding accomplishments. You stop sharing positive news. You avoid discussing goals. You minimize progress. You downplay blessings. You silence your voice. You convince yourself that staying invisible will create peace. Unfortunately, it rarely works. People determined to compare themselves will continue comparing, regardless of how small you become. People determined to misunderstand will continue misunderstanding, regardless of how carefully you explain yourself. People determined to resent your growth will continue resenting it, even if you never mention it. This realization becomes a turning point, because it frees you from the exhausting task of managing perceptions that were never under your control. Instead of shrinking, you begin focusing on authenticity. Instead of hiding, you begin embracing gratitude. Instead of apologizing for your blessings, you begin honoring them, not with arrogance, not with pride, but with appreciation. You recognize that every lesson, every breakthrough, every blessing, and every opportunity carries responsibility. You stop viewing your growth as something to conceal and start viewing it as something to steward wisely. The chosen often carry another burden that few people discuss. Because they are compassionate, they frequently internalize the negativity directed toward them. They ask themselves whether they could have done something differently. They replay conversations. They analyze situations repeatedly. They search for ways to fix relationships that were never theirs to fix. This emotional weight becomes exhausting. It drains energy. It creates self-doubt. It steals joy from moments that should be celebrated. Yet there comes a point where healing requires accepting a difficult truth. You cannot heal wounds that belong to someone else. You cannot resolve insecurities that another person refuses to confront. You cannot force someone to celebrate what they have already chosen to resent. What you can do is continue becoming the person God created you to be. You can continue walking in integrity. You can continue showing kindness. You can continue choosing grace without sacrificing self-respect. You can continue loving people while recognizing healthy limits. This balance is one of the most powerful forms of maturity. It allows you to remain compassionate without becoming captive to other people's emotions. The chosen often fear that setting boundaries will make them selfish. In reality, healthy boundaries often preserve the very kindness they value most. Without boundaries, resentment grows, exhaustion grows, frustration grows. With boundaries, peace has room to flourish, purpose has room to flourish, emotional healing has room to flourish. God never intended for your compassion to become self-destruction. He never intended for your kindness to require the abandonment of your own well-being. He never intended for your purpose to be sacrificed on the altar of other people's expectations. The truth is that many of the jealous reactions you encountered throughout life were never signs that you should become smaller. They were reminders that your identity could not be built on human approval. They were lessons teaching you to seek validation from a deeper source. They were opportunities to strengthen your relationship with truth rather than popularity. Every season taught something valuable. Every disappointment revealed something important. Every misunderstanding refined something within you. Looking back, you may realize that some of the people who doubted you unintentionally strengthened you. Their criticism forced you to develop confidence. Their rejection forced you to discover self-worth. Their absence forced you to deepen your faith. Their misunderstanding forced you to become more secure in your identity. None of those experiences felt good while they were happening, yet they contributed to the person you are becoming. You carried burdens that few people ever noticed. You survived battles that never made headlines. You endured seasons that nobody applauded. Yet here you are, still standing, still believing, still growing, still moving forward. That matters more than you know. Your ability to keep going despite disappointment is evidence of remarkable strength. Your willingness to remain kind despite hurt is evidence of remarkable character. Your decision to keep believing despite setbacks is evidence of remarkable faith. Those qualities cannot be measured by public recognition. They are measured by the courage required to continue when nobody else understands the journey. If this message helped you see your experiences through a new lens and reminded you that your growth is not something to hide, subscribe to the channel and continue joining a space where faith, resilience, healing, and purpose are honored. Sometimes encouragement arrives exactly when it is needed, and may the messages ahead continue strengthening the hope already growing within you. There comes a season in the life of many chosen people when they stop asking why jealousy keeps appearing and begin asking a different question entirely. They stop asking why others react negatively to their presence and start asking how they can continue walking in peace regardless of those reactions. This shift changes everything. It marks the moment when emotional freedom begins replacing emotional captivity. For years, many people live as prisoners of other people's opinions. They monitor every reaction. They analyze every criticism. They carry every misunderstanding. They allow the approval or disapproval of others to determine their emotional state. The chosen often fall into this pattern because they genuinely care about people. They want harmony. They want understanding. They want healthy relationships. Yet eventually, life teaches them something profound. Peace cannot depend on universal acceptance, because universal acceptance does not exist. Even the kindest people will be misunderstood by someone. Even the wisest people will be criticized by someone. Even the most compassionate people will be judged unfairly by someone. The goal was never to earn approval from everyone. The goal was to remain faithful to who God created you to be. This realization becomes especially powerful when you look back across your journey. Think about all the seasons that could have convinced you to quit. Think about all the moments when disappointment seemed stronger than hope. Think about the relationships that ended unexpectedly. Think about the opportunities that disappeared. Think about the prayers that seemed unanswered. Think about the loneliness that lingered longer than expected. Think about the exhaustion you carried while still showing up every day. Through all of it, something within you continued moving forward. There was a strength deeper than your circumstances. There was a faith deeper than your fears. There was a resilience deeper than your setbacks. That strength was never dependent on human approval. It existed long before anyone recognized it. It existed during the silent seasons. It existed during the painful seasons. It existed during the forgotten seasons. It existed when nobody was applauding and nobody was encouraging. The fact that it remained is evidence that your value was never determined by the opinions around you. One of the greatest victories for the chosen is learning to stop interpreting jealousy as proof that something is wrong with them. For years, many people carry that burden. They see negative reactions and immediately turn inward. They assume they must have failed. They assume they must have made a mistake. They assume they are somehow responsible for every uncomfortable interaction. While self-reflection is healthy, constant self-blame is not. Emotional maturity requires the ability to recognize what belongs to you and what does not. Your responsibility is to walk in integrity. Your responsibility is to remain honest. Your responsibility is to continue growing. Your responsibility is to treat people with respect. Beyond that, you cannot control how others interpret your existence. You cannot control the stories they create in their minds. You cannot control the insecurities they refuse to address. You cannot control the comparisons they choose to make. Carrying responsibility for those things will only exhaust you. Freedom begins when you release burdens that were never yours to carry. Many chosen individuals discover that jealousy loses much of its power once they stop taking it personally. This does not mean they become cold. It does not mean they become indifferent. It simply means they gain perspective. They recognize that another person's reaction often reveals more about that person's internal struggle than it does about their own character. Suddenly, experiences that once created confusion begin making more sense. The criticism that seemed random, the hostility that seemed unnecessary, the distance that seemed unexplained. None of it necessarily reflected your worth. In many cases, it reflected battles taking place within someone else. This understanding creates compassion without requiring self-condemnation. You can feel empathy for someone's struggle without accepting false narratives about yourself. You can wish someone healing without allowing their pain to define your identity. You can forgive without surrendering your self-respect. These distinctions are incredibly important because they protect your heart while preserving your kindness. Too many chosen people spend years believing they must choose between strength and compassion. The truth is that both can exist together. You can be gentle and strong. You can be humble and confident. You can be forgiving and discerning. You can be loving and still maintain healthy boundaries. In fact, some of the strongest people are also the most compassionate because their strength allows them to love without losing themselves. Another lesson many chosen people eventually learn is that their uniqueness was never a mistake. For a long time, feeling different can seem like a burden. You notice things others overlook. You feel things deeply. You care intensely. You think differently. You value things that others may not understand. These differences can create feelings of isolation, especially when you spend years trying to fit into spaces where you were never meant to belong. Yet over time, many discover that the very qualities that made them feel isolated are also the qualities that make them impactful. The sensitivity that once felt overwhelming becomes empathy. The perseverance that developed through hardship becomes leadership. The wisdom gained through suffering becomes guidance for others. The faith strengthened through adversity becomes encouragement for those who are struggling. What once felt like a burden reveals itself as a gift. This transformation often happens gradually. It unfolds through years of growth, healing, and self-discovery. As it does, the need for external validation begins fading. You stop measuring your value by how many people understand you. You stop measuring your worth by how many people support you. You stop measuring your success by how many people celebrate you. Instead, you begin measuring life by different standards. Are you becoming more faithful? Are you becoming more compassionate? Are you becoming more resilient? Are you becoming more aligned with the purpose placed on your life? These questions create a much stronger foundation than public approval ever could. The chosen often discover that peace grows when identity becomes rooted in purpose rather than popularity. There is tremendous freedom in knowing who you are. There is tremendous freedom in understanding that your story matters even when others misunderstand it. There is tremendous freedom in recognizing that your value remains unchanged regardless of who sees it. Some of your greatest victories happened in silence when nobody was watching. Some of your greatest growth happened during seasons nobody celebrated. Some of your most important decisions were made in private moments known only to you and God. Those moments still count. Those victories still matter. Those lessons still carry value. The world often celebrates visible achievements while overlooking invisible strength. Yet invisible strength is what sustains people when life becomes difficult. Invisible strength is what helps someone keep going after disappointment. Invisible strength is what allows kindness to survive heartbreak. Invisible strength is what keeps faith alive during uncertainty. You possess more of that strength than you realize. The fact that you survived seasons you once thought would destroy you is evidence of it. The fact that you continue believing despite setbacks is evidence of it. The fact that you still care despite being hurt is evidence of it. The fact that you still hope despite disappointment is evidence of it. None of these qualities developed accidentally. They were forged through experience. They were refined through challenge. They were strengthened through perseverance. Not every battle you fought was in vain. Not every tear was wasted. Not every delay was meaningless. The seasons that tested you were also shaping who you were becoming. God saw every moment. God saw every struggle. God saw every sacrifice. God saw every prayer whispered in exhaustion. Even when answers seemed distant, your journey was not being ignored. Even when doors remained closed, your life was not without purpose. Even when loneliness lingered, you were not forgotten. Sometimes growth happens quietly. Sometimes preparation happens invisibly. Sometimes the most important work takes place beneath the surface, before anyone can see the results. The chosen often live through these hidden seasons. They wonder whether anything is changing while transformation is taking place deep within them. Then one day they realize they are stronger than before, wiser than before, more peaceful than before, more secure than before. They realize the difficult seasons were not empty, they were formative. If jealousy has followed you throughout your life, do not allow it to convince you that there is something wrong with who you are. Let it remind you instead that your worth cannot be determined by comparison. Let it remind you that your identity must be rooted in something deeper than human approval. Let it remind you that the gifts within you were never given so you could hide them. Let it remind you that your story has value. Your perseverance has value, your faith has value, and your future still holds possibilities you cannot yet see. You are worth far more than the moments that tried to make you feel small. Your kindness matters, your endurance matters, your faith matters, your journey matters. And the fact that you are still standing after everything you have faced says more about your strength than you may ever fully understand. If this message encouraged your heart and reminded you of the value God placed within you, subscribe to the channel and continue walking with others who are pursuing healing, purpose, faith, and growth. May every message ahead help you remember that you are not alone. Your story is not over, and your quiet strength continues to matter more than you know.